Honey, they're saying the matte ash rose cabinet fronts will cost an extra $800. Pay it quickly before the euro jumps. Elvira's voice from the smartphone speaker was so piercing that Bars, the cat dozing on the windowsill, twitched an ear in annoyance. Paul, frantically swiping the screen, tried to lower the volume, but his finger slipped to the speakerphone button. The effect was the opposite. And the countertop. The phone screeched across the entire kitchen. I decided on engineered stone. It doesn't stain with beet juice. Polina stood in the doorway, towel in hand. She had just stepped out of the shower, planning to enjoy her morning coffee and head to work. Instead, she became an unwitting listener to a captivating radio play titled How to Spend Someone Else's Savings in 3 Minutes. Paul finally wrestled the phone into submission, ended the call, and nervously cleared his throat. His gaze darted around the kitchen, avoiding his wife's eyes. He looked like a schoolboy caught smoking behind the gym by the principal. That was Mom. He stated the obvious, trying to feign nonchalance. His smile looked as out of place as skis in the desert. I heard. Polina walked to the table, poured herself a glass of water, and took a sip. The water was too cold, but it helped clear the last vestiges of morning grogginess. I have another question. What kind of countertop are you planning to pay for, when your payday is still 2 weeks away, and your debit card had barely enough for a coffee yesterday? Paul squared his shoulders. At such moments, he liked to switch into head of the family mode, which usually activated solely during arguments about money. Polina, you know Mom's renovating. She's always dreamed of a proper Italian kitchen. As a loving son, I have to help, especially since there's a sale. With what money, Paul? Polina's voice remained even, without a hint of hysteria. She worked as a financial auditor for a large chain. Hysterics were not in her purview. Numbers were. Her husband scratched the bridge of his nose. Well, I took a little from our savings account, just a bit. Polina silently placed the towel on the back of a chair, stepped into the hallway, took her phone from her purse, and opened her banking app. Password, loading, balance update. On the account, where yesterday there had been $94,000 saved for Polina's new car, now proudly glowed 2 lonely digits, $16.40. She blinked. The numbers didn't change. Just a bit? Polina raised her gaze to her husband, who had already managed to move closer to the escape route. $94,000 is just a bit to you? Oh, don't start. Paul waved his hands as if shooing away an annoying fly. It's just money, we'll earn more. And Mom is my only one. Look at her old kitchen. The cabinet doors are falling off. I've already transferred the payment to the furniture salon as per the contract. Everything's official. I'll get a loan later and pay you back. Polina closed her eyes, assessing the situation. The man she had lived with for 4 years had just, with one transfer, emptied her savings to buy his mother ash rose-colored cabinets. He wouldn't get a loan because his credit history was a sieve. 2 years ago, he had unsuccessfully tried his hand at business, leaving behind only debts and a bunch of smart-sounding words in his vocabulary. Arguing with him right now would be as productive as trying to teach Bars higher mathematics. She didn't scream, didn't break dishes. Polina turned and went to get dressed. Where are you going? Paul called after her, clearly bewildered by the lack of a scene. To work. To earn money. You need to eat, son, she tossed over her shoulder, zipping up her skirt. In the office, the air conditioners hummed a steady, lulling background. Polina sat at her desk, staring at the monitor. Summary sales tables were dotted with red markers, but her thoughts were far away. Inna, the head of the logistics department, plopped down beside her. A vibrant woman with a short haircut and a bulldozer personality. You're a bit stiff today, Inna diagnosed, sipping coffee from a paper cup. Did your mom's businessman pull another stunt? Polina turned to her friend, drumming her fingers on the desk. He blew my car money, $94,000, to order my mother-in-law an Italian kitchen. Inna choked on her coffee. Drops splattered across her keyboard. She grabbed a napkin, frantically wiping the plastic. Stop. Your money from the account you gave him power of attorney over in case you got into an accident on a business trip? Exactly. And you just came to work? Divorce him immediately. A divorce will happen, Polina calmly replied, opening a browser tab. But a divorce won't solve the problem. The money went to a legal entity's account. If I just file for divorce, that amount will hang in the air, and then we'll spend a year and a half fighting over it in court, and it's not guaranteed I'll get the full amount back. I need to get the money back now, before the kitchen is delivered. She typed the name of the furniture salon she'd seen in the bank notification into the search engine. Elite Mobili. Elite Mobili, a salon of high-end Italian furniture, located in the city center. A beautiful website, monograms, golden fonts. During her lunch break, Polina was already parking the car share by the glass doors of this temple of luxury. Inside, it smelled of expensive leather, sawdust, and ambition. A consultant, a young man in a too-tight suit, immediately darted over to her, beaming a polished smile. His name tag read Edward, senior manager. Good afternoon. Are you looking for something specific? We have a new collection from Milan. Good afternoon. I'm looking for contract number 418, signed this morning in Paul's name. Polina pulled out her ID. I am his wife. Edward's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly composed himself. I understand. However, according to our salon's rules, we only discuss order details with the person who signed the contract. Polina leaned her hands on the manager's desk. Her gaze, usually calm, now resembled a laser sight. Edward, let's save us both some time. The payment was made from a bank account opened in my name. My husband made the transaction without my knowledge. I have two paths. First, I call the bank, report an unauthorized debit. Then I file a police report for fraud. Your account will be frozen pending investigation. Do you know how quickly corporate accounts are unfrozen? 3 months, at least. Payments from other clients will be stuck. Your suppliers in Milan, or wherever you source this MDF, will start asking questions. Edward swallowed nervously. The tight collar of his shirt suddenly felt too small. Or, Polina continued, enunciating each word, we open the contract right now and make a small correction. Under consumer protection laws, a customer has the right to refuse goods before they are delivered. But the kitchen is already in assembly, the manager mumbled, giving ground under the onslaught of this woman who was clearly not joking. Nonsense. It was ordered 3 hours ago. Even if your Italian craftsmen work at the speed of light, they haven't cut a single piece of wood yet. We'll fill out a return request, right now. The money will be returned to the card it came from, which is mine. Edward hesitated. His fingers nervously fumbled with his mouse. I can't just cancel an order like that. Your husband needs to be present. Fine. Polina pulled out her phone and ostentatiously began dialing a number. Bank security works 24/7. Wait! Edward threw up his hands in surrender. Business is business, and no one wants frozen accounts for the sake of one problematic client. I can process the return as an erroneous transaction, but the money will take 5 to 7 business days to go through. That's acceptable, Polina smiled sweetly. But only after you give me a printed confirmation of the order cancellation with your salon's stamp. While Edward huffed and puffed filling out the return forms, Polina opened Craigslist and in a few minutes found what she was looking for. A rusty, working gas stove, pickup only, for $200. Location: 10 minutes from her mother-in-law's apartment. She messaged the seller and arranged for delivery on Thursday at 3 p.m. to Elvira's address. In the order comments, she wrote compensation for inconvenience. Polina's phone vibrated. Elvira was calling. Polina, without changing her expression, pressed the answer button. Polina, darling? Her mother-in-law's voice dripped with so much honey it could have caused a sugar rush. You already know the news. Paul gave me such a gift. That's what comes from raising a son right. Not like some people, who only think of themselves. I heard, Elvira. Glad for you, Polina replied evenly, watching the printer spit out the sheet with the coveted stamp. I've already ordered the installers, her mother-in-law boasted, not noticing Polina's tone. They're tearing out the old kitchen right now, getting the space ready, and on Thursday, at 3, the salon will come and assemble my beauty in a day. You and Paul absolutely must come for the housewarming. I'll treat you to pudding. Elvira's illusions were so grand they could have covered a city like a dome. We'll definitely come, Polina promised. Bare walls are a very bold design choice. Loft is so in style right now. She hung up, took the paper from the manager, neatly folded it, and tucked it into her purse. The first stage of the plan was complete. The money was coming home, but one nuance remained. Paul, the man who decided he could dictate her life, needed to learn a lesson, one that would stick in his muscle memory. Back at work, Polina finished her reports at warp speed. Her mind was crystal clear. She sketched out a plan of action for the coming days. In the evening back home, Paul acted like a man who had performed a heroic deed. He sprawled on the couch, flicking through TV channels. Bars the cat sat on the rug, judging his owner, as if understanding the extent of his foolishness. "How was your day, dear?" her husband asked, not tearing his gaze from the screen where soccer players ran. "Productive," Polina replied, heading to the kitchen. "And yours?" "Oh, I'm dog-tired." "Discuss details with Mom. We still need to order a glass backsplash. Could you chip in about $300 from your paycheck for the installation?" "I'm completely broke." The audacity of this request was so phenomenal it deserved a place in a museum. Polina took a piece of meat from the fridge. "We'll see, Paul, we'll see." The next 3 days passed in preparation. Polina behaved perfectly. No reproaches, no arguments. Paul blossomed, deciding his wife had come to terms with the situation. He even started leaving half-empty teacups all over the apartment, feeling like the undisputed master of the house. On Wednesday evening, Polina met with a realtor and signed a lease for a small but cozy apartment closer to her work. The first month was paid for with the very money Elite Mobily had successfully returned to her account. To this new apartment, Polina gradually moved her favorite belongings, winter clothes, and most valuable documents. All this was done during lunch breaks, while Paul, working remotely, was lost in computer games or off overseeing the massive destruction at his mother's apartment. Elvira, by the way, had completely demolished her kitchen. From her phone reports, which Polina regularly listened to on speakerphone, it was clear that the old kitchen set no longer existed. The stove had been thrown out. On Thursday at 3 p.m., delivery from the salon was expected. On Thursday morning, Polina took a day off. She woke up early, looked at her sleeping husband. He was snoring peacefully. There was no trace of remorse on his face. Polina went into the kitchen. A pot of carcho had been in the fridge since yesterday evening. She had cooked it for herself, simply because she wanted a decent meal. She put the soup on to reheat. The aroma of garlic and cilantro filled the apartment. Polina turned off the stove, covered the pot with a lid. Then she opened her laptop and accessed the property management app. She confirmed that the utility bill was indeed overdue. Paul hadn't paid for a month. Polina walked to the electrical panel in the hallway, flipped open the cover, and silently clicked the circuit breaker down. The apartment didn't change. It was daytime, bright. She closed the panel back up, then pulled out a pet carrier. Bars the cat, sensing something amiss, tried to hide under the couch but was extracted and placed inside. "Sorry, buddy," Polina whispered, scratching him behind the ear. "But it's time for you to pack your bags too." She took the cat and the last bag of belongings to the new apartment, then returned. The clock showed 4:30. Paul arrived exactly at 5 p.m. Happy, rosy-cheeked, he kicked off his shoes right in the hallway and sniffed the air. "Polina, is there any of your famous soup left? I'm exhausted today." He washed his hands, plopped down at the kitchen table, and rubbed his palms together. Polina reheated her carcho, poured a full ladle of thick soup into a bowl, added a handful of fresh herbs, placed a spoon, and set it before her husband. Paul reached for the spoon. His eyes sparkled with anticipation of food and a sense of his own triumph. He had pulled off $1 million scheme, and his wife even reheated his soup. Life was good. Polina sat down opposite him. She looked at him with an utterly calm gaze. In that gaze, there was no anger, no resentment, only cold calculation and a slight smirk. Paul had already raised the spoon over the bowl, but at that very moment, Polina said, "If your mother ordered an Italian kitchen then, darling, whose money do you plan to eat with this month?" With these words, Polina gently, with the tips of her fingers, pushed the bowl of hot carcho away from him, slowly, steadily, until the bowl was at her edge of the table. Paul froze, with an empty spoon in the air. His eyebrows climbed, forming deep wrinkles on his forehead. "Hey, what are you doing?" He tried to laugh, deciding it was some strange joke. "Give me the soup, I'm hungry. And let's skip your lectures about money." Polina folded her hands on the table. "The soup stays here. There will be no lecture. There will be facts, Paul." Paul frowned, irritably throwing the spoon onto the table. Metal clinked, breaking the kitchen's silence. "Go to hell," he snapped, getting up from the table. Childish pique mixed with irritation. "I'll get it myself. Just need to wash my hands." Got dirty with your antics. He turned and went to the bathroom. Polina remained seated at the table. The second hand on the wall clock ticked away. 1, 2, 3. Paul entered the dark bathroom, reached for the light switch. Click. Nothing happened. What's going on? The bulb burned out. His disgruntled grumble came from the darkness. He stepped back into the hallway and flicked the light switch there. Silence. And then Polina spoke, raising her voice just enough for him to clearly hear every word. The power's off. Paul, did you pay for last month? No. Well, that's it then. We've arrived. Paul burst into the hallway. In the dim light, his face seemed a pale blotch. Are you crazy? Off? I need to charge my phone. Mom's going to call. Oh, she will call. Polina smiled slightly. And very soon, because I canceled the order for the Italian kitchen on Tuesday evening. The air in the apartment seemed to thicken like cotton. Paul froze, covering his mouth. Slowly, with the creak of rusty gears, the meaning of what she said dawned on him. What did you do? He wheezed. I canceled the order. The payment came from my card. I just went to the salon, threatened them with a bank audit, and processed the return. The money came back to my account. But the installers, Mom said. The installers are coming. They are, Paul. Of course they are. I'm not a monster. Polina stood up and walked to the bowl of soup, took the spoon, scooped up some broth, and ate it with relish. I can't leave an elderly woman in a demolished apartment without even being able to boil water for tea. At that moment, Paul's phone vibrated. The ringtone shattered the hanging tension. Mommy flashed on the screen. Paul, with trembling fingers, swiped the screen and put the phone to his ear. At first, nothing but inarticulate croaks came from the speaker. Then the croaks escalated into a shriek so powerful that Polina winced, even several feet away. Paul, the phone roared, what does this mean? Someone brought a rusty stove into my kitchen. They said it was paid for by some Polina. Where's my kitchen? Where are my Italian cabinet fronts? My neighbor came to see it, and they're putting in a dirty particle board cabinet. Paul reeled back against the wall. His eyes widened to the size of saucers. Mom, I don't understand. What don't you understand? His mother-in-law continued to rage. Take this junk and bring me my kitchen. Paul, in a panic, tried to answer something, took a step forward, tripped over his own shoe lying in the middle of the hallway, flailed his arms, and crashed to the floor with a clang, dropping his phone. The device flew under the cabinet, continuing to pour curses in Elvira's voice. Paul sat on the floor in the dark hallway, rubbing his bruised knee. His stylish haircut was disheveled, his illusions shattered, and the grandeur of the head of the family dissolved without a trace. Polina calmly finished her spoonful of carcho, wiped her lips with a napkin. I'll file for divorce tomorrow morning, she said, picking up her bag. I've already taken Bars's things, and mine too. The apartment, as you remember, is rented, in your name. How you'll pay the landlord for rent and the electricity bills is your problem. Polina, wait. Paul tried to get up, floundering in the jackets that had fallen from the hanger during his epic fall. Let's talk. We're family. Where will you go? Somewhere. No one tries to dip into my pocket, Paul. She opened the front door. Coolness and freedom wafted from the stairwell. And you? Move in with your mom. Help her clean that stove. They say grease remover works wonders. Shisha stepped out onto the landing and closed the door, leaving her husband alone with the darkness, the debts, and the phone screaming from under the cabinet. Polina walked downstairs, got into a taxi. Evening streetlights were already coming on. She checked her app balance. $94,000 was safely in place. Ahead lay a warm evening in her new apartment. Bars the cat, and absolute, pure tranquility. Justice, it turned out. Tasted like perfectly cooked harcho. Thank you all for listening. Until next time.